Good morning and welcome to our second program for Grade 8 Agricultural Science. Today we will learn about conservation farming. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain what is meant by conservation farming, outline the aims of conservation farming practices in Namibia, discuss the limitations of natural resources, example, land and water in our country. Identify negative effects of soil erosion on farming. Suggest methods of preventing erosion. Example, filling dongas and building contour walls. Describe the fragile nature of our ecosystem and how it can be damaged by careless agricultural practices. Let us now have a look at what conservation farming is. Conservation farming is farming that is practiced in such a way that the natural resources are not destroyed or overused. This is very important because it ensures that the future generations will have good quality soil, enough clean water, and enough plants to farm successfully. Farmers who practice conservation farming study the rainfall, climate, soil, and topography of the land. They then use this information to choose the most suitable plants and animals for farming in that particular environment. Conservation farmers keep the soil fertile by using manure and compost, which are environmentally friendly. Conservation farming aims to conserve soil, water, indigenous plants, and useful organisms such as insects and birds. It tries to protect useful plants and conserve the environment while providing food and employment. It aims to prevent environmental pollution and desertification, and to maintain the fertility of the soil to ensure that future generations will inherit fertile, unpolluted land and sufficient clean water. How will farmers reach these aims? Chemicals are used as little as possible. Many different kinds of crops and plants are grown. Indigenous plants are grown, which helps the birds and insects that depend on these plants to survive. Soil is covered with mulch to prevent water from evaporating. This also prevents soil erosion. Manure and plant waste from the farm are used to fertilize the soil. Only plants and animals suited for the land are farmed with. Animal and crop farming takes place at the same time. This is referred to as mixed farming. Adopted seeds are used. More than one crop is grown together. Drought-resistant crops are planted. Rainfall water is collected in big dams and tanks. The natural resources in Namibia have some limitations, and when farmers know this, they can try to farm better. Soil in Namibia is generally infertile. Most soil is sandy and some soil contains lots of stones. These all make the soil unsuitable for growing crops. Farmers have to work hard to prepare the soil for crop production. Some farmers use chemical fertilizers, but this can damage the environment, soil, and water. One of the most important limiting factors in crop production in Namibia is low rainfall. It is difficult to grow crops if farmers cannot irrigate. Farmers have to use sufficient water in such a way that the plants can produce at its maximum. The high temperatures in Namibia is also limiting crop production, and farmers have to plant crops that are adapted to these temperatures. If soil is not taken care of, and farmers allow soil erosion to take place, future generations will have less and less soil to produce food on. Soil erosion means the fertile topsoil is being taken away by wind and water. Soil is very important as it provides support and nutrition for plants. It hosts microorganisms that help break down organic matter to release nutrients, which are used by plants for healthy growth. Soil is a natural resource that cannot be renewed. If it is not treated properly, it can be lost. Let us see what happens when soil erosion is not controlled. As the topsoil is washed away, the soil loses its nutrients and becomes infertile. Vegetation dies, and the land eventually becomes a desert. This process is called desertification. Because the topsoil is washed away, water does not sink into the soil. This means that less and less water goes underground to replenish the underground water source. Eventually, boreholes dry up. We can see that it is important to control and prevent soil erosion. What should farmers do? Avoid chopping down trees, plant trees and other plants to hold the soil. Reduce the number of animals on the land. Plant grasses or shrubs in small gullies and fill up big gullies and dongas with stones and old tires so that they collect sand when water flows through during rains. This process will eventually fill up the gullies with sand. Plant along the contours to prevent soil being washed down by flowing water. Always cover the soil with mulch. Plant trees in a line to act as windbreaks to break the speed of the wind. Plant a second crop between the rows of one crop. This protects the exposed soil against erosion. Add organic matter to the soil regularly. This gives the soil a crumb structure which allows water to enter quickly. Avoid planting on steep slopes. Make terraces along the slope of a hill. Plow across slopes instead of up and down. This allows the water to run sideways instead of downhill and prevents soil from being washed away. Build roads across hills instead of up the slopes. It is also possible for farmers themselves to destroy the environment, sometimes unknowingly. A lot of damage is done by wrong farming practices. The following are some of the ways how the ecosystem can be damaged by careless agricultural practices. Planting only one type of crop in the same place every year. This depletes the soil of all its nutrients. Plowing the soil too often so that the topsoil becomes very fine and is then easily blown away by the wind and washed away by water, or by plowing the wrong way. Destroying indigenous trees and other plants to plant crops and build structures. Burning the veldt too often. Wasting underground water by drilling too many boreholes. Keeping too many cattle in one area. This leads to overgrazing, which in turn leads to soil erosion. Using chemicals that can kill important organisms in the environment and pollute water sources. Let us have a look at what we learned about conservation farming today. Conservation farming is to use resources in such a way that there is enough left for future generations. The limitations of natural resources are infertile soil. Most of the soil in Namibia is sandy and some contains many stones. Low rainfall. High temperature. Soil erosion is the removal of the fertile topsoil by wind and water. Soil erosion can be controlled by filling dongas, planting windbreaks, mulching, and contour plowing. Careless farming practices can destroy natural resources. For example, planting one type of crop, which is referred to as monoculture. Plowing too often destroys the soil structure. Burning the field too often. Too many boreholes depletes underground water. Keeping too many animals on one area. Overuse of chemicals. Viewers, before we sign off, I would like to ask you a few questions to think about. Question number 1. Explain conservation farming. Question number 2. Describe how soil erosion can be controlled. And question number 3. Discuss the limitations of the natural resources in Namibia. Learners, thanks again for joining me on this exciting trip that we had dealing with conservation farming. I hope you learned a lot, but please stay tuned as we have lots more coming for you.